Everybody cool it.
I'm Ken Cavanaugh. Tonight, music on Telescope with Ben McPeake.
That's all, folks.
If you watch television or listen to the radio, you know the music of Ben McPeake, whether or not you know his name. Ben is one of our most prolific composers of commercial jingles. Banks, oil companies, breweries, credit cards are all busily sending you their messages via McPeake's catchy melodies. Centennials also provide him with continuing employment. You all know that Bobby Jimby wrote Canada for 1967, but it was Ben McPeake who did the memorable arrangement you heard so often. He's doing the same for Manitoba and British Columbia. But Ben McPeake is also a classically trained musician who studied composition at the University of Toronto. He's written symphonic music and a comic opera. That training has been vital to him, as Ben explains.
If you don't have a great deal of craft, if you don't know your craft, your melody sounds like you worked very hard on it, and it's very clever, and it's very nice, and it's boring.
Here's music by McPeake, then, for this edition of Telescope, directed by Colin Smith.
I've been interested in writing music since I was a kid. I had melodies. My melodies go on in my head forever and ever, sort of. And like anything you can sing, you can write down. And all I really did was acquire the facility to write down what was in my head. This is the way I always write. When I was a kid, I used to hate practicing. Now I'm an adult and I hate writing. How do you get an idea? Number one, I generally have somebody has a gun at my head and says, we've got to have this by Monday if you ever want to work with us again. And they always say, please do something memorable. And that's generally what I try to do. Lots of people say, how can you hear those things in your head? Well, it's just like you plan. You think of something that you want to do, and then if you know your craft, the actual orchestration, that's like sort of a realization of the craft. It's like playing the piano. There's a difference between conceiving of a melody. Originally, music is something that's sung. The primitive peoples sang a song. They sang something, and then somebody beat on a hollow log, and that was the first orchestration. And then the first thing the singer said was, do you have to play so loud? And that's sort of been the problem ever since. This is something I think is a little more interesting. This is a type of scoring, say arranging and composing that I've been doing for a number of years. When I first sort of did this thing, there wasn't very much of a market for it, but we're getting into a little bigger orchestras here in Canada and doing things. Like the problem is, my mother always used to say about my early productions, you're not as good as Henry Mancini. Well, we haven't got 40 strings like Henry Mancini, and we haven't got the thing bankrolled. All these jobs are, they have to pay for themselves. And I have a kind of a funny little numbering system. It doesn't get a number unless it's a paying job. That's why I have no opus numbers on any of my classical works. This is Toby Larch, Too Much. She's the lead singer in Hair. She's a girl from Detroit, and we did this recording in the church. That's myself playing piano and plastic SEMQ band accompanying her. George SEMQ's the engineer at RCA Victor, who's mad to play. We had a lot of fun doing the thing. I was saying to myself, here I am, like 15 years later, and I'm playing rehearsal piano in a church, trying to teach some people my song. particularly interesting is the pickup. I played this record for some people in the U.S., and they said, "Wow, how many voices you got there?" And I said, 647. And they said, "That's impressive." I said, "You should have had to pay the ACRA fees, you know." And then I read they were using. You can tell it's recorded live in St. Paul's Cathedral. It's pretty important that a person has a background. Music is so obsolescent today that today's hit is gone forever. And at the same time, which a lot of people are not aware of, is it's so expensive to do music today. All our union cost, our cost of living is going up a mere 6% a year, and wages seem to be going up 1% a year. You have to be fast in the studio. How does a person get a writing technique? If you have a writing technique, you have to write, and you can't just say, "Pay me," every time you write something. I mean, first you have to know your craft before you can make a living at it. What I've tried to do is learn my craft in several different areas. Orchestration, playing piano. I mean, I play all sorts of piano. Really a lovely day today. I always enjoy when the sun's shining and I drive through the underpass.
It's the real thing. That's the way it should be.
I can drive in 18 minutes to work on the Gardner, driving up through Spadina up to my office on Hazelton. Very quick trip. My nemesis is the great big diesels when I drive this little car. It doesn't drive very fast. They tend to wipe me out. I've been in Toronto almost 15 years now and never have looked back. There's an awful lot of opportunity here. Anybody that wants to watch television or listen to radio, just imagine who writes all that music that's on.
We like to look after you, look after you.
One of the problems we have is the threshold of noise, the threshold of pain, I call it. It's very, very noisy in the city. Even my office, there's such a roar that we'd have to build sound deadeners to keep the sound from outside. My only form of recreation, other than music, is scuba diving. And I'm going to do a little scuba diving out in British Columbia this summer. Things I like about British Columbia, it still seems to be unspoiled, and it's not nearly as polluted as things are down here in the east. It's also very peaceful, and I think I'd like to retire in British Columbia. This is my parents' place, Christina Lake, BC. My children, Ben and Jerome, out there on the wharf. They're homemade wharf, and Grandpa made them. And that's my wife, Angela. And my parents are then sitting there drinking ginger ale this afternoon. This is one of the last unspoiled lakes left this close to the American border. And with that comment, I leave you.